Hello and welcome to the webinar about organic dairy research at Utah State University. I'd like to welcome Michael Greenland, who has just completed his master's degree in plant science at Utah State. He's going to tell us about his research on the effects of dairy breed, Grass-Birdsfoot Trefoil mixture, and pasture nutrition on intake, feed efficiency, and grazing adaptation of organic dairy cows. This work is part of ongoing research at Utah State funded by NIFA, OREI, and Western SARE. You can find more information about this project at eorganic.info/dairy forages. So Michael, I'm going to hand over the screen control to you now.
Okay. So thank you, Alice, and thanks everyone for coming to listen to this presentation. I will be presenting on the data from my master's thesis and about different dairy breeds on pasture. So why study pasture grazing? So one reason is that it can be less expensive because you have your own source of food out there for the animals. They can go graze on your land as opposed to a feedlot where you have to keep on buying food for them. But probably the biggest reason is, and most relevant for this presentation, is because the organic industry has been increasing and has been becoming more important. And in order for milk to be considered organic, the animals have to be on pasture for at least 120 days each year. And they have to eat the pasture too, not just be on pasture and eat something else. And so one of the big problems that we see with that is that the animals are producing less milk when they're grazing pasture. And the reason for this is because they eat less or they have a lower dry matter intake. We have a history here at Utah State trying to look at this problem, trying to figure out why the cows are eating less on pasture and then help them eat more. So one graduate student, TJ Bingham, he looked at mixing different legumes with grass, seeing if that would help. And so a legume is a plant that produces its own nitrogen. And nitrogen is very important for protein. So these plants have more protein, so they're higher quality for the animal. And also nitrogen is really important for the fertilizer, for fertilizing plants. So legumes need less fertilizer since they produce their own nitrogen. So with TJ, he had 4 treatments. He had alfalfa mixed with grass and birdsfoot trefoil mixed with grass. Then he had just grass that was fertilized and then grass that was not fertilized. And ultimately, he saw that the birdsfoot trefoil mixtures seemed to be doing the best. They led to the greatest cow gain, so the cows were gaining more in those pastures. And it also had the added benefit of not having the threat of bloat. So a lot of legumes can cause bloat in the animals, which can be fatal if not treated. But birdsfoot trefoil is a special legume that has something called tannins in it, so it prevents it from causing bloat. Another thing is that it's lower cost since you don't have to fertilize legumes as much as opposed to pure grass. So the next graduate students were Marcus Rose and Jacob Hadfield. And so they kept on with the idea with the birdsfoot trefoil mixtures. But this time they added 4 different grasses. And so they had 8 treatments. They had the 4 different grasses just by themselves, and then they mixed those 4 with birdsfoot trefoil. And they had Jersey heifers on those 8 treatments. And ultimately they found that it didn't matter what grass type you have. Whenever you mix the grass with birdsfoot trefoil, that mixture always led to greater intake and greater gains for the cows than that grass by itself. So once again, we see the power of mixing grasses with a legume with birdsfoot trefoil. Other things they found is when they looked at the forage quality of the forages that they were using, they saw that forages with lower fiber and higher energy and a good leaf texture led to greater intake as well. Another interesting thing that they found is that they could explain about 50% of the animal's intake based on just the forage alone. And so some of the questions that we had is, well, what's the other 50% that's affecting intake if forage was only 50? And so we were thinking, well, an obvious choice is the animal then. The animal, maybe the genetics of the animal is affecting their intake. And as we talked to the producers, they have the same idea that some of the producers were thinking that certain dairy breeds are better out in pasture than others. And so that's where my research comes in. Some of the questions that we're asking is which breed can graze more, which breed is less picky, so which one can eat lower quality forage and be okay with that, and which one best uses what they eat. And that corresponds with my 3 objectives here. So how does breed and forage type and their interaction affect forage intake, adaptation to grazing, and feed efficiency? And I'll be going over each of those 3 more in depth later on in the presentation. For my study, it lasted 3 years from 2019 to 2021. And important to note, I'll be looking mainly at the forage effect on things. We work closely with other departments that looked more at heifer performance and the environmental effects of things. But this presentation, my data is focused more on the forage. Okay, so my experimental design, I had 2 factors. First was dairy breeds. So I had Holstein Jersey cross, and then a Holstein Mount Billiard Swedish Red Cross. And so we got these breeds by renting them from producers. So there was 1 year where we didn't get that exact breed, but we got close. We got a Viking Red in there instead of Swedish Red, but we think they're basically the same. So we treated those as the same. The other factor was with or without Birdsfoot Trefoil. So whether the animals are grazing just grass or if they're grazing grass mixed with Birdsfoot Trefoil. And there's also 3 pastures or blocks. So to help you understand the design, here's an example of one of the pastures that we have out there. And you can see that the pasture is divided into 2. One half is without Birdsfoot Trefoil. So this is the grass monoculture. The other half is the grass mixed with Birdsfoot Trefoil. And then you can see that we have each of the 4 breeds on each of those halves. You can also see up here on top that we have different grasses that sort of change as you go through the pasture. But that's less important. That's just sort of how the pasture was set up, but that's not one of our factors. Also, we're doing a rotational grazing system. So we have 10 paddocks throughout the pasture. So how this works is at the beginning of the season, we have all the cows start there in paddock 1, and they graze for 3.5 days. And after they graze for 3.5 days, we move them all over to paddock 2, and they graze for another 3.5 days, and they move again. So they keep on doing that pattern, grazing for 3.5 days in each paddock until they get to paddock 10. And then after they're done grazing, we take them off the pasture for a little bit just to weigh them and take some other measurements on the animals. And then we start them again here at paddock 1. And so ultimately during a season, they graze through a pasture 3 times for a total of 105 days of grazing. Some things to note. So my experimental unit is the 4 cows collectively and the 10 paddocks collectively. So what that means is that the data that I'll be presenting is based on the performance of all 4 cows collectively, not individually. And is also based on how they performed in all 10 paddocks collectively, not individually. So I won't be able to tell the differences between the different grass types in the different paddocks. But yeah, so in one pasture, you can see there's 8 experimental units. With 3 pastures, we have 24 experimental units. Okay, so one of the most important measures I take is intake. And all my other measures are sort of based on this measurement. So what we want to do here is figure out how much forage is out in a paddock before the animals start grazing it. And then we want to find out how much is left after they finish grazing a paddock. And then once we have that beginning and end, we subtract the 2 and we know how much they ate during that time. And so how do we figure out how much forage is out there? So we use 2 things. We use a rising plate meter here, and we use forage samples. So with the rising plate meter here on the right, It's a nice little handheld device. It has a shaft and a plate. The plate freely moves up and down the shaft. And so you can just push it into the ground. The plate stays on top of the forage and the shaft goes until it hits the soil. And so the difference between the plate and the bottom of the shaft tells us the height of the forage. And so that's not real nice and easy, but it only tells us the height, and we want to know the weight, how much is there. And so that's where the forage samples come in. The forage samples help us calibrate the rising plate meter. So what we do is we take a spot, we do the rising plate meter, and then we take a forage sample in that exact spot. We cut the forage, we put it in a bag, we dry it, and then we weigh it. And now we know that this many centimeters from the rising plate meter equates to this many kilograms of forage. And we take a lot of these samples to calibrate the rising plate meter. I believe it's around 7,000 samples to help calibrate that. So now with that calibration in place, we're pretty confident with this rising plate meter that it can tell us how much forage is there. So what we do is before the cows enter, we do 30 rising plate meter measurements, just zigzagging. We also take some rising plate measurements to get a random while they're grazing, and the average tells us how much forage is there. After they leave, we measure with the rising plate meter again. And so like I said, now we have a before and an after, and we can subtract the two and we get that intake. And so that's our basic equation for intake. There is a little bit more that goes into that. We do try to take into account how much the forage is growing while the cows are grazing. And we also try to take into account how much of the forage is destroyed by the cows trampling it or things like that. But this is the basic equation. We do other things with the forage samples that we take. We also separate the sample to see what percent of the forage is birdsfoot trefoil. And then we also grind it to a powder and put it through an NIRS scanner. And ultimately that scanner can tell us the nutritive value of that sample. So how much protein it has, how much fiber, things like that. And in this presentation, I will not be presenting that data since it wasn't part of my thesis, but we will be publishing that data later on. Okay, so one of the problems that we ran into right from the beginning is that we're working with different breeds, and these breeds are all different sizes. So a Holstein, for example, is going to be bigger than a Jersey, and that's just how they are. And so a bigger animal obviously is going to eat more than a smaller animal. And then also there was some variation within the breeds too. Like I said, we're renting the breeds, and so we were trying to rent the cows all about at the 40% mature body weight, but we weren't perfect at that. So there was some variability within the breeds. And so our solution for this is that we wanted to compare everything to mature body weight. So the mature body weight is how much they should weigh when they're done growing. So for a Holstein, that's 1,500 pounds is what they should be when they're done growing. Jersey is 1,000 pounds when they're done growing. And so for this example, say we have a Holstein that gains 150 pounds and a Jersey that gains 100 pounds. I mean, that would be expected because the Jersey is eating more, so you expect the Holstein is eating more, so you expect the Holstein to gain more. Jersey is eating less, so you expect it to gain less. But in this example, that's the same percent of their mature body weight. And so that's what we're hoping, is that the animals should be gaining about the same rate of their percent mature body weight. And another thing that we use is that we convert the weight to the metabolic live weight. And the equation for that is really easy. You just take the body weight and you raise it to 0.75. But what this is trying to get at is how much weight of the animal is active tissue that is using energy. And this method has been used by other studies to help compare different breeds. So ultimately, using these two ideas, we came up with an animal unit, where one animal unit equals 40% of the metabolic mature body weight. And so what that means is that an AU for a Holstein is going to be a bit more than Jersey. And that's because they're different animals, different sizes, and that's by design. And so the data that I'm showing you, we divide by animal units. So intake would be divided by animal units, and we hope that helps compare the breeds better. Okay, so going on to the results. So like I mentioned, my objectives were to look at forage intake, grazing adaptation, and feed efficiency. So first, let's just orient you to the graphs that I'll be showing you. So these graphs on the left side here, it's the 4 breeds on mixtures, so grass and birdsfoot trefoil mixtures. And then on the right, you have the 4 breeds on the grass monocultures. These letters indicate statistical significance. So if 2 bars have the same letter, that means that they're statistically the same. So here for dry matter intake, you can see, so first looking on the mixture side, you can see for every single breed, they ate more on the mixtures than they did on the monocultures. And so this is something that we've been seeing in the previous studies, and in this one, that every single time it seems that if you have a pasture with birdsfoot trefoil mixed with grass, it's going to do better. It's going to cause the animals to perform better than on grass monoculture. Other things, so with the breeds themselves, you can see that the Holsteins seem to eat the most, and then the crossbreds in the middle, and the Jerseys ate the least. And that's the same whether on mixture or monoculture. And this is also not too surprising. We see that Holstein generally eat more, Jerseys eat less, and the crossbreds are in the middle. Okay, so the next measurement, grazing adaptation. So how does intake change during the 3.5 day grazing period? Does one breed have more consistent intake throughout the grazing period? And this is measured as intake per hour. So to help explain what that all means, so this graph shows how fast the animals are eating within a paddock. So that's why we took our rising plate meter measurements while they were grazing, so we could divide the grazing period into smaller periods. And so what we're seeing here is when they first enter a new paddock, there's a lot of good high quality forage there. And so the animals are excited, they eat a lot and eat quickly there at the beginning in the first 24 hours. But then after that first 24 hours, they go down quite a bit. And the reason for that is that they ate most of the good quality forage there at the beginning. And so now they're left with lower quality forage. And so it keeps on decreasing there. What we're trying to get at with grazing adaptation is there a breed that doesn't go down as much as the others, that can handle that low quality forage? So maybe they start up here with the rest of the breeds, but instead of going down too much, maybe they just go down a little over here for those other hours because they're better at eating low quality forage. So looking at the different breeds, ultimately we're not seeing that, which is surprising. So you can see here, so the Holsteins are on the top, the crossbreds are in the middle, and the Jerseys are on the bottom. And that same order stays true in all time periods. What we were expecting to see happen, so for example, if the crossbreds were more efficient or were better at eating low quality forage, we'd expect them, so in this middle time frame, maybe they'd be about the same as the Holsteins, and in the last time frame, they'd be above the Holsteins because you could see that they were getting a little bit better. I mean, they were better than the other breeds on low quality forage, but we're not seeing that. The order stayed the same. And so that was a real surprise. We really thought there would be one breed that was better at eating lower quality forage than the others. And so this is a close-up in those last 38 hours or 36 hours that they're in a paddock. And like I said, we expected a different ordering, but ultimately this graph is basically the same as the intake graph I showed you earlier, where you have the Holsteins on top, then the crossbreds, and the Jerseys on the bottom. Another thing that is interesting is that we're not finding any forage type and breed interaction. So what that means is that if there was an interaction, we'd expect the breed order to be different on the mixture side compared to the monoculture side. So if there was some breeds that were better on low quality forage, so let's say crossbreds, once again, they were better on low quality forage. If they were, we expect on the monoculture side, they'd be higher, equal to or higher than the Holsteins, because monoculture is lower quality, but we're not seeing that. So once again, so now we have two different ways of looking at this, whether at grazing adaptation or looking at possible interaction, but both are saying that at least between these four breeds that they have no advantage on different forage quality. They perform about the same on different forage quality. Okay, so the last measurement that I have here is feed efficiency. And this one is a little bit harder to understand. So I have this little demo to help explain it. So what feed efficiency is the animal's ability to convert what they eat into the product that we want. And so the product that we want is weight gain. So in this example, we have two animals that are the same size and they're going to eat the same amount of forage. So they eat the same forage, but one of these animals definitely gained more than the other. So that animal was more efficient because he was able to put that food into the product that we wanted, which was gains. This other animal ate the same amount, but for whatever reason, he couldn't convert it into the gains that we wanted. So maybe that food just went right through the animal, he never used it, or maybe he used it, but he burned it up, he ran around too much and burned up all the energy. We don't know why this animal is less efficient, but we're just trying to measure, trying to figure out which animal is more efficient. And we believe, so obviously with dairy cows, we want to know if they're efficient as far as milk production. And since with my study, I worked with heifers, so they're young cows that don't produce milk. But in previous studies, we see that there is a correlation with feed efficiency, with weight gain during heifers, and also that can transfer to milk production when they're older. Other things to mention with feed efficiency, that this is a little bit newer measurement in this field. So there are lots of studies that look at feed efficiency, but less that compare different dairy breeds together, and even less that compare different dairy breeds on pasture. And I believe my study is the first one that compares the feed efficiency of different breeds on two different different pasture types, and also the first one that compares feed efficiency between breeds on a Birdsfoot Trefoil pasture. So there's a lot of firsts here. And so we took a lot more measurements of feed efficiency, trying to find out which one is the best. But ultimately, this data isn't as clear as some of the other data I showed, but hopefully this will help future studies look more closely into this. So one measure that we did was feed conversion efficiency. And so this is the easiest measurement. You just simply take how much they gain, divide it by their intake. And then if they gain more for the same amount of intake, then they were more efficient. So that would be higher numbers mean better efficiency. Some limitations with this is that it has a high correlation to intake, which means it's less helpful for genetic selection. And it also can't be standardized to animal unit. And we thought animal unit was really important with comparing between breeds. So what happens here is, to do it right, you have to have gains in animal units and then intake in animal units. And when you divide it, it cancels out the animal units. So that's one limitation without that measurement. So the net energy for gain ratio, this one is very similar to the feed conversion efficiency, but instead of taking everything they ate, the whole intake, we're just looking at the energy component that they ate. So it's roughly familiar or similar to calories versus how much total amount you ate. versus the calories you ate. So that's just looking at energy. So the last one, last measurement, we have residual feed intake. And this one is the one that we have the highest confidence in. So the equation itself is pretty simple. You just take actual intake minus expected intake. But calculating expected intake is a little bit more in depth. We have to run a regression, and it's based on the body weight of the animals and how much they're gaining. And we also ran a regression where we also factored in the percent mature body weight of the animals. And so that all goes into the regression. And the regression is based on data from our own animals that we're getting this expected intake. So other things with this one is that it's moderately heritable. So that's better than the feed conversion efficiency. It can be standardized to animal units. So that's better. One thing that's odd is that lower numbers are better. So to help explain this a little bit better, so I have this, this isn't real data, I just sort of made up the numbers just to help you understand this concept. But ultimately, in this graph, this line in between the orange and the blue, that's our regression line where we ran a regression, and now this is our expected intake. And so for an example where an animal gains 10 kilograms, if you go across there, their expected intake would be 100 kilograms because it's right there on the line. And so in this equation, actual minus expected, you put the actual there, or the expected there in the equation. Now, if the animal actually had to eat more to get that same amount of gains, then they'd be less efficient. So you put it up here and you can see a positive number means that they're less efficient. But if they were able to eat less for that same 10 kilogram gain, then they were more efficient. So you can see a negative number means more efficient. So hopefully that helps explain RFI a little better. Okay, so with the results, so this graph, I'll be looking at RFI first. And this graph I feel is the most straightforward. It's the easiest one to interpret. So that's why I'm starting with it. So looking at mixture versus monoculture. Now, once again, lower numbers are better. So the monoculture is actually more feed efficiency. And that was a surprise to us at first because we thought, mixtures always have the better results. But looking at other studies, this does seem to make sense. Other studies found the same thing, where when you feed an animal lower energy or when an animal had lower intake, then they generally have better feed efficiency. So we don't have a good explanation for this yet, but at least it's similar to previous studies that have been done. And then as far as differences between breeds, you can see that the Jerseys are the most efficient for both mixture and monoculture. And then the other breeds are statistically the same. So yeah, that was the easiest graph to interpret, but it gets a little bit more complicated. So with this one, this is another RFI measurement, but this time we added the percent mature body weight into the regression. And so you see, once again, the monoculture had better feed efficiency, but the differences between the breeds is less clear. They're not as statistically significant. So the Jerseys are still there on the top of the list. They seem to be the most efficient, but they're not statistically different from the Holsteins. And those Holsteins are doing better than we thought they would. We thought the Holsteins would be on the bottom of the list, but here they seem they could be between the crossbreds and the Jerseys. And then going on to these other measurements, so feed conversion efficiency and the net energy for gain ratio, they both tell about the same story. But like I said, we don't have as much confidence in these measures. So one thing you can see, so in this one, higher numbers are better. So it's a little bit different than RFI, but higher numbers are better. And on the monoculture side, now the monoculture is less efficient. And so that disagrees with the RFI. But like I said, we have more confidence in the RFI measures. Now, as far as efficiency between breeds, once again, it's less clear. The Jerseys are still on the top of the list, but those Holsteins are also up there. They're statistically the same as the Jerseys. And the crossbreds seem to be a little bit lower. And so, like I said, we don't know why the Holsteins seem to be this efficient. Okay, so in conclusion, with the intake, Holsteins had the highest intake, then the crossbreds, and then the Jerseys had the lowest. And all breeds had higher intake on the Birdsfoot Trefoil grass mixtures. For grazing adaptation, we see that it mimics the results in the intake data. And ultimately, we find out from that no breed had an advantage on higher or lower quality forage. And then finally, with feed efficiency, with all the graphs, it seemed that the Jerseys seemed to be most efficient. They were always on the top of the list, but the other breeds are a little bit less clear. Perhaps those Jerseys are more efficient than the crossbreds. And then ultimately, we believe that the monocultures cause better feed efficiency than the mixtures. So I just want to thank all the sponsors that provided the grants for this research. We have Western Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education and Organic Agriculture Research and Extension Initiative. So appreciate their grants. Also want to acknowledge everyone on the team. There's a lot of people that make this work. Blair, Earl, and Clay are co-authors to this study. And then Sawyer and Chase are other graduate students, and their data is focused more on the cow performance, and they'll be publishing that later on. So thank you for listening, and I'm ready for questions.
Okay, so Amy is asking, she's unclear on your experimental design. If you had 4 animals blended per treatment, you really have 2 experimental units per breed. Is that right?
So yeah, in a pasture, there's 2 experimentals per breed, but they're on different pasture types.
Let's see, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I just want to thank you, Michael, for giving this presentation on such short notice and for summarizing your research. And I wish you the best of luck in your new position. And thanks to everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity.